This week we started a series that we are calling Soul Care. And the premise of the series is that if our word for the year is deeper, then we have to first start internally before we can ever have a conversation about what deeper looks externally. And that the most important thing about your life is that you take care of your soul. Scripture says that what does it profit a man to gain the whole world can forfeit his soul? Your soul is essential, but to do that, we have to first understand like what the heck that even means. What does it mean to be us, right? And so what we did was we used the scripture, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23. It reads like this. Now, may the God of peace make you holy in every way, and may your whole spirit and soul and body be kept blameless until our Lord Jesus Christ comes again. Can I believe what's happening is Paul is breaking down what it actually means to be like human. That you are a spirit and you have a soul and you live inside of a body. And if you did not grow up in church and you don't have a theology degree, that's big time confusing. And I did my best to try to walk you through what that means, but essentially the spirit part of you is what God meant when he said he made you in his image. That is the eternal part of who you are. And then obviously your body is the part that interacts with your world. So you touch, taste, see, smell, all those things. But your soul is that middle ground. It's that space right there that's feeding one or the other, and that it is incredibly crucial. And the way we defined the soul is that it is your mind, it is your emotions, and it is your will. And what we meant by that is that to break mind down meant it's really the thoughts. It's the way you think. It's the way you think about yourself, the people around you, the world around you. And then emotions, essentially the feelings. It's the way you feel. It's the emotions you're experiencing about yourself, about your world, about the people around you. And lastly, the will is really your routines and behaviors. It's the way you walk out. It's the way you interact with the world. And that your soul is made up of those three parts. That is the whole of who you are. And what we said last week is that your soul is the rudder to your life. Your soul is the rudder to your life. So what that means is that what happens in your soul is either moving you closer to the person God has called you to be, or it is moving you further away. That you are either leaning more into the spirit side of you, the part that God said, I made you in my image, or are you leaning more into the body side, the flesh side of you? That's where all the sin and all the negative stuff plays out. And that what we do here in the middle ground, what we do in our soul, how we feed our soul, how we care for our soul, is either going to move us further towards the person God wants us to be or further away. And that is a really, really big deal for us. And my question for you today as we start the sermon is, do we have any people in here that would say, like, I'm a science guy, I like science, I'm a fan of it, like Nat Geo, in school you about that life, you like to geek out, learn things. Okay, cool. Well, I am. I might not have graduated high school, but I definitely find science to be super fascinating. I might not understand any of it, but I think science is super dope. And if I'm being honest with you, if what took me a really long time to following Jesus is I always believed that faith was for stupid people. That honestly only idiots follow Jesus because science is truth. And it felt like faith and science always wrestled with each other. Now that I'm 29, almost 30, and I followed Jesus since, I was 16. So I got about, 13 years in on this thing. What I've actually found out is the opposite is true. That actually science and faith almost always work together. And those gaps in between we don't understand is usually just we don't fully grasp all that God is doing. And I actually think that your soul is like that. I actually think that science has actually mapped out the soul. And I think it has given us beautiful terminology and beautiful understanding of actually what it means for our soul. And there's a guy named Aaron Beck, and he created cognitive behavioral therapy. And so he created the CBT triangle, and that's what this thing right here is for you. Let's throw that up real quick. And this triangle essentially breaks down the way we process emotions and who we are, right? And it's saying that your thoughts feed your feelings, feed your behaviors. And what I would argue with you is this is actually your soul on a screen. That this is your mind, that this is your emotions, and that this is your will. That the way you think about yourself is going to feed to the way that you feel about yourself, which will ultimately feed to the routines and decisions and the patterns that you create inside your life. And that this thing right here, this triangle, is really science's way to try to communicate a scriptural truth. And that is your soul. And when we don't do this thing right, chaos ensues. Like if you don't have your soundtracks figured out, if you don't have the thoughts that you have inside your head lined out, like if you aren't intentional about what you're thinking, guess what's going to wind up happening? You're going to feel like crap. If you talk about yourself terribly, you're going to feel terribly. Same thing's true with your feelings. If you get your feelings out of whack, if they're all over the place and you don't know what you're feeling or why you're feeling it, guess what's going to wind up happening? The things you do with your life are just up in the air. We just be doing things, just living life, doing stuff, not knowing why we do it or what's happening, just motivated by a ton of emotions we don't fully understand. And if your behaviors are out of whack, if the routines and the patterns and the things that you do in your life and the way you spend your time aren't healthy, guess what's going to wind up happening? You're going to think really awful about yourself. You're going to think terrible about your world. You're going to think terrible about the people around you. This thing, no matter where you get off track in it, creates nothing but chaos, which is true for your soul. But when we don't properly care for our soul, chaos ensues. It matters that we understand how to care for our mind. It matters that we understand how to care for our emotion. It matters that we understand how to care for our will, our routines, and the patterns that we have inside of our life. It matters that we figure this thing out. So we are going to get into the practical today. How do you actually walk that out? So the question really becomes is, where do we start? In my personal opinion, you start in the mind. Like, you're going to start on the thoughts. Like, I think what you think changes everything. Like, I can't think of a place in your life for you to start working on that creates a better, bigger, faster domino effect in your life than controlling and thinking through what it is you're thinking. And so I think it starts with your soundtracks. And it's a terminology that we've recently started. Last fall, we preached a sermon series titled Soundtracks. And what we said soundtracks are is they are the repetitive thoughts. It's not just the thing you one-off think about. It's the thing you stay on. It's those thoughts that keep coming back. It's those things you say to yourself constantly. It's those things you say about the people around you constantly, the world that you live in constantly. And we call it a soundtrack because those negative thoughts really just become part of your personal playlist. It's like your own playlist of negativity that can just run and destroy everything, or it's healthy. And it's actually the thing moving you towards all the amazing things that God has for you, but those soundtracks change everything. They are so crucial to the way we see, interact, and feel with our world. And so the first question really is how do you process that? What does that look like? How do you get control of the soundtracks? And it is a terrifying first step. At the first step, you've got to take inventory. You've got to actually think about what you're thinking about. It means pausing, actually processing what it is you thought, how you felt, getting into the internal mechanisms that are playing out, because your soundtracks are creating feelings for you. So it starts with processing about what it is you're thinking about. Have you ever had whether it be your mom or a teacher come to you and be like, what were you thinking? And you dead serious could answer the question, pass a lie detector test. I have no idea. Just happened. Don't know why I did it. Did it though. But I legitimately could pass a lie detector test. I genuinely do not understand why I did that. And that was my life story until I was 26. Not 16, 26. My whole life has honestly just been a constant pattern of I don't actually know. I did. I just kind of responded. It just happened. I don't really know how we got in that moment, but we are here. I didn't ever really understand what it was that I was thinking about. And what happened is because my soundtracks were out of whack, what happened? Well, my emotions were all over the place, which made me make an irrational decision that created a ton of chaos because of the decisions, the behaviors, and the patterns that I lived. And what I've realized is that most of us don't actually ever think about what we're thinking about. And this is true across personality types. Even if you're the most structured individual, most people never really take an inventory of what it is they were actually thinking. When they got to a decision, when an emotion happened, when a behavior changed, when a routine started, most people don't ever actually process how the heck they got there or what they were thinking about. So there's no way to actually change anything because you don't know where it started. And what I would say is every reaction is an education. Every reaction is an education. Every way you respond to your world tells you something about who you are. Some of y'all think you're good at hiding. You are not good at hiding. There's a phrase that Jared says all the time, our lead pastor, it's your feet do the voting. The truth is your patterns, the way you live out your life will always tell on you. The way you spend your time, the way you talk about you, the things you say, what you do, it all tells on you. Your reactions are an education always. And because we don't fully understand our thoughts, what happens is we feel things we don't understand, would lead to behaviors that we don't know why we did. So how do we take inventory? If we don't understand ourselves that well, if we don't see ourselves that clearly, how the heck do we figure this thing out? And I think it starts with James chapter 1, verse 5. And it says this: Now, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. What I want you to understand is nothing God's called you to do, you ever have to do by yourself. Like, you have heaven's help to figure out what you're thinking. Like, it was one of the most difficult things ever for me to kind of dig through like what I was thinking because I didn't fully understand. And I think the first step always is to go to God and be like, God, help me see what I can't see. Help me have eyes to see, the right questions to ask, the right people to go to. Like, start with Jesus, because what winds up happening is there are some things you start seeing you didn't know why you saw, but you see. And I wish I could explain that better to you, but it's just part of the spiritual relationship with Jesus. There are just some things that when you go to God, he lines out for you. You don't exactly know why it happened or how it happened, but you can finally see it. And for me, there were so many things in my life that once I finally started asking myself, what was I thinking? I began to start seeing, started asking God, how do I figure this thing out? But for some of you, it's like, that's cool and all, bro, but like, I'm not sure I even follow Jesus, or I don't know if I know God. How do I do that? How do I take inventory? How do I figure out if a soundtrack's broken or not? I got you. Here's how you do it. First thing you have to ask yourself is it kind? Is it kind? Here's what I think. If you've ever been in a relationship longer than like 2 weeks, one of the first fights you will ever have is what you said wasn't necessarily wrong, but how you said was. It's like, I mean, yeah, I wasn't lying to you. Like, it's true. I was like, I know, but like how you said it matters. Like, almost every fight I've ever had with Nicole is tied to tone. Like, it's how I said it. It's not so much what you said, or even if what you said is true, it's how you said it. It's the why behind what you said. And the first thing you got to figure out when it comes to the way that you think about yourself, other people, or your world is it kind? Are you looking for hope, or are you looking for reasons to doubt? Are you trying to find the best, the most optimistic version of the people in yourself, or are you trying to go negative Nancy with everything? If it's not kind, it will never produce the fruit you want. God does not speak to you like that. God does not talk to you like that. God does not talk about you like that. Yet for some reason, you've given your permission to talk to yourself a way you would never talk about anybody else. Some of you are saying things to yourself or about yourself that you would literally never say to another human being, but you do to you. It's not kind. And the first question you need to process when it comes to the way you think and you talk about yourself is it kind? Would Jesus talk to you like that? Would you talk to anyone else like that? And if it's not, then you already know from the jump you've got a broken soundtrack. The next question you have to ask yourself is it true? I mean, like, we say so many things that we like believe to be true. That if you could just take a step back and 10,000 foot view this thing, you would know it's not. Like, there are so many narratives we have that we are holding fast like they are the gospel, like Jesus himself said them. But if you were to ask yourself if it's true, you'd realize it's a lie. If you are telling yourselves that things aren't true, then, well, guess what, my friend? You found a broken soundtrack. I think there's a third part to this, and the question that you have to ask yourself is it helpful? The truth is that there are some things that are true, but they actually aren't helpful. Like, is the thing I'm saying to myself, is the thought that I'm meditating on, is the thing that I keep talking about to people around me, is it helpful? Is it pushing me closer to the person God's called me to be, or is it pulling me further away? If it's not helpful, it's not a soundtrack you want to be listening to. It's not a soundtrack you're going to be saying to yourself. So I'm going to walk you through an example. This literally happened to me like last week. So one thing we tell you a lot, I was like, your pastor ain't perfect. So I'm going to walk you through, like, I legit am not perfect. Real talk, I'm still wrestling with my own soundtracks. So I'm in the office, and it's like Monday, and everything feels okay. So it's a normal day, and Trevor's like talking about his baby shower. And I'm talking about, like, I don't go to things on Saturdays, you know, Sabbath and whatnot. Like, I'm resting, I'm chilling. And he's like, but, oh, are you not going to go to my baby shower? And I go in. When I go in, I go in. It's like, no, I'm not going to your baby shower. Why would I go to your baby shower? Like, first off, dudes don't go to baby showers. Second of all, I don't go to their baby shower. I didn't go to their baby shower. I'm dang sure not going to your baby shower. Baby shower is not my thing. Like, guys don't do that. I'm cool. I'm not, like, I am so out on a baby shower. That is the corniest, lamest girl thing you can possibly think of. These are like real talk words I'm saying. Like, these are coming out of my mouth. None of this is hyperbole. And I am just going in on the whole concept of a guy attending a baby shower and how stupid and ridiculous this request is. And then I just go on about my day. Now, Trevor is an Enneagram 1, which is going to make a little bit more sense for you after next week's sermon, but basically, like, he's not a fighter, he's an internalizer. So he's got a whole lot that's happening internally. And, like, it's a solid 30 minutes later. We're in Homeland, and it just dawns on me. I just went in on his baby shower. Like, what was that about? Why did I just do that? Like, what is even happening? Like, the check back with Trevor was like, you wanted me to go to that, didn't you? And then, like, it all just full. I was like, oh my gosh, I just set this man's whole thing on fire for no reason. And it's like, what just happened? There's a broken soundtrack. What just happened was there's a thought I had never processed that ran amok. And it created weird emotions that I wasn't ready for, and it led to behaviors and actions that I wouldn't want to repeat. You see, my thought created an emotion that created behavior that I regret and wish I wouldn't have done. Broken soundtracks create for you chaos all the time. And the best of us, the most mature of us, the wisest of us still have them. It matters that we care for our mind by processing our soundtrack. So what does that look like? All right, what was the soundtrack I was wrestling with? Men don't go to baby showers. That's the soundtrack. And I promise you that is absolutely tied to a ton of daddy issues and a bunch of nasty machismo and unhealthy masculinity things that sports and life taught me. So I don't subscribe to any of it, but it came up, right? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, is what I was saying. Is that true? Do men not go to baby showers? So the first question you ask, first one is it kind? Absolutely, it's not kind. Like, why in the world would I first off just eliminate a whole thing off of life for me? Also, clearly did not create good emotions for Trev. Is that a kind thing to tell yourself? Men don't go to baby showers? No, bro. Like, what are you saying? Who you got to be a man for anyways? Like, what's happening? It's dumb. So then the next one you got to process yourself, is it true? Well, no, it's not true. Trevor's going to be at his own baby shower. There's at least one dude. And there's going to be a ton of other guys there. It's like, do men not go to baby showers? Yes, they go to baby showers. It's the dumbest truth. It's the dumbest soundtrack to ever tell yourself. But man, it felt so true when I said it. Like, I was like, of course they don't. Dude, there's going to be so many there. Like, I will not be the only one. It'll be way more than that. And the last one, was that even helpful? Even if that were true, would it be helpful? No, it wouldn't be helpful because all it did was disrespect something that mattered a ton to Trevor. All it did was create tension with someone I care about, with someone I love, with someone I consider a brother. Like, it created tension that did not have to happen. It wasn't helpful. You can do this over and over and over and over again with every single soundtrack, with every single thought you have in your life, trying to process whether or not it's broken or not. We can do it with the soundtracks that we all wrestle with all the time. One of them being like, I'm not enough. I mean, for some of us, that is so deep. That is ingrained in who we are, that I am not sufficient. I cannot do this. I'm not ever going to get it right. Is that kind? No, absolutely not. It paints the worst picture of you ever. Is it true? No, it's not true. You absolutely are enough. God did not make a mistake when he made you. You have everything you need to be all God's called you to be. Is it helpful? No, because it removes every desire or effort I'll ever want to make to grow or to do anything new. I'll give you one more. Another one we have is I have to be perfect. Must get it right at all times. Is that helpful? No. You're putting a ridiculous amount of pressure on your shoulders to live every single day with. There's nothing about that is helpful. Is it kind? No, it's putting a ridiculous amount of pressure on you. Is it true? No, it's not true. You don't have to be perfect because God is. It's the most beautiful part of our faith is it's actually based on who he is. It's based on how good God is, not how good you are. You don't have to be perfect. Is it kind? No. Is it true? No. Is it helpful? No. But the thing is identifying that it's broken doesn't really fix it because it'll surface tomorrow. It'll surface next week. It'll happen to you the next time pressure hits. So the next step is you have to replace it. But the question is like, how though? How do I replace the broken soundtrack? And I think we find this with Proverbs chapter 11, verse 14. It reads like this. Where there is no guidance, the people fall. But in an abundance of counselors, there is victory. What I would say to you is never process alone. Never process alone. You're not going to get it by yourself. First off, because half of us are just going to lie to ourselves and tell us we're better than we think we are. And then the other half of us are going to go the extreme opposite way and tell us that we're worse than we actually are. You should never process by yourself. You need the right people in your life. You need the right counselors. You need the people you trust to be there because they're going to help you see what's actually true. I spent that whole day Monday. The truth is that was not the only one. There's like 4 other ones I did that day. Monday was not a great day for your boy. But like at the end of the day, I had a bunch of people asking me questions like, are you good? Like, what's up? Like, this is not your normal flow. And I didn't have any idea that there were things off in me until that moment. When the people I trust were able to come in, they would help to give me guidance so I could navigate this thing, so I could get victory over the soundtrack. So I could start processing it. What I would say to you is you should never, ever process by yourself. And we believe it so much. That's why you have tribes. I mean, yes, we want you to have great relationships, a place that you can hang out, a place to have fun. But also we want you to understand that you need people who believe in you to help you realize all God's called you to realize. You got to have people that can hold you up, that can encourage you, that can guide you, that can love you so you can step in to all the things God has called you to do. So who are your counselors? Who are those people God's put in your life to help you take the steps you're called to? Who are the people you trust enough to help you understand your own soundtracks, the things you're saying to yourself, the thoughts that you have about yourself? Who are those people? And when you realize who they are, run to them. Invite them to the conversation. And once you find out that the soundtrack is broken, it's time to flip it. It's time to take that soundtrack and flip it on its head. I told you last year in the fall when we did this series that like the one that's haunted me my whole life is that worth must be proven. That like I have a ridiculous amount of insecurities. Like I'm still up here today wrestling with whether or not I'm smart enough to walk you through how to actually care for your soul. Like there's so much pressure I put on myself all week long to make this make sense for you because of how big a deal I believe this is for you. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to get up here and your response to me or what we do at the end of this or what your interactions in the conversation are going to dictate for me my own value. But the truth is your response does not determine my worth. Jesus does. You see, the soundtrack that worth is given or is proven is a lie. The true soundtrack is worth is given. The true soundtrack is that Jesus said I was called. So whether or not everyone in this room decides to follow Jesus or doesn't, or whether or not tonight is the greatest tribe you've ever had or it isn't, I'm still loved. I still have value. God still wants to use me. You don't get to change that for me. But I have given every room I've ever been in that power, and I spend my entire life constantly walking through this soundtrack and having to remind myself daily, worth is not proven, it's given. Another one that we wrestle with all the time is like for some of you, you have really, really awful relationships with authority in your life. Whether it's your teachers, whether it's your coaches, whether it's your parents. And the basis for so much of that is you just think they're mean. Like all of their rules are suffocating. All they're trying to do is rob you of fun. All they're trying to do is ruin your day. All they're trying to do is keep you from the things that you should get to do. That's a terribly unhealthy soundtrack. Why? Well, because it's not kind. It's painting the worst possible picture of your mom and dad. It's also not true. It's not real. It's not accurate. That rules are suffocating. And it's definitely not helpful. The real soundtrack, the flip of that, is that healthy things have boundaries. I mean, everything in nature you see grow has the right environments around it. When you're gardening and you're trying to grow tomatoes, you see the cages people have put around them. Why? So they're supported. Healthy things have boundaries, and whether you are 12, 16, or 30, you need them. You need them. I'll give you one more. I must be perfect. For some of you, man, you could see every imperfection with excruciating detail about you. When you see the mirror, all you see are the things you wish were different about you. You can't even see the good about you. All you see are the broken pieces that you feel like are there that everyone else sees, that everyone else fixates on. And so you put this pressure on you to be perfect physically, to be perfect emotionally, to be perfect mentally. So anytime there's a crack, anytime there's a failure, anytime pressure hits, you fall in on yourself because you've lied to yourself thinking you must be perfect. It's a terribly unhealthy soundtrack. It is broken as broken can be. The real soundtrack should be that beauty is found in the imperfections. Man, God did not make a mistake when he made you. He made you on purpose with purpose. Like every part of you was designed with intentionality. God has a beautiful plan to use you. It's actually the imperfections that make you beautiful. Scripture says that he is made perfect. He is made strong in my weakness. It's the fact that you don't have the ability to do it all that gives room for God to be God. It's the fact that you couldn't get it all together by yourself that makes God that amazing. That makes the story he's writing with your life so profound, because when you get to the end of it and you reach the end of the journey and you change the world and your life is different and legacies after you are different because of the life you lived, you're going to be able to look back and remind yourself that God did it anyways. With the imperfection, with the thing that I thought wasn't good enough, God used it anyways. The soundtrack you need to tell yourself is that beauty is found in the imperfections. You don't have to be perfect. God's not asking you to be. And the last step to this whole thing as we close is you got to repeat them over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until they're as automatic as the old ones. Part of my morning routine is to remind myself every single morning that worth is given. Every morning, part of the way I start my day is I look in the mirror and I say to myself, worth is given, not proven. Worth is given, not proven. And you might think that's ridiculous. You might think that's dumb, but I can tell you today, that soundtrack does not haunt me the way it used to. I wish I could tell you, man, that once you identify it, once you flip it, that's all there is, and that's just not true. If you've spent the last 16 years of your life telling yourself things that aren't true, if you've spent the last 16 years of your life haunted by broken soundtracks, it's going to take more than a 30-minute sermon to fix them. But what I can tell you is with God's help, anything is possible. When you decide to remind yourself to repeat the healthy ones over and over and over again, eventually they take hold. Eventually you start to believe it. Eventually you start to see, no, this is actually who God sees me to be. Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says, do not be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the good, pleasing, and perfect will of God. Before you will ever be able to realize all that God's called you to be, it starts with taking care of your soul. It starts with caring for your mind. It starts with controlling the thoughts. It starts with processing the soundtracks. It starts with talking to yourself the way God talks to you. Renewing your mind is a process of intentionality. It doesn't happen in a day. It doesn't happen in a week. It doesn't happen in a month. It happens with repetition. It happens with reminding yourself over and over and over again, this is who God says I am. This is what's true. This is who I am. The first step to soul care starts with your mind. So here's what this looks like. Tomorrow, decide what you're going to think about. Get ahead of it. Before you ever start into the rooms that trigger you. Before you get home tonight, some of you need a pregame. Before you get in that car tonight, some of you need to decide what you're going to think, what you're going to say. Before you ask your mom or dad anything, you need to remind yourself that healthy things have boundaries. And even if I don't agree with them, even if they freaking frustrate me, healthy things have boundaries. For some of you, what you need to say before you step into that next test, before you get into class, before you start that next game, you need to remind yourself that worth is given, not proven. That regardless of what that grade is, regardless of what the score on that scoreboard is, regardless of any other things that I put my hands to, I've already been deemed to be valuable because God said I was. And for some of you, when you wake up in the morning and when you look in the mirror, you need to remind yourself that beauty is found in the imperfections. That God didn't ask you to be perfect, that God didn't ask you to have it all together, that it's your imperfections that make you the work of art you are. It is those things that God is going to shine through and change the world through you. Let's start thinking about what we think about. Let's take control of our mind. Let's watch what God can do as we process the soundtracks. What I can promise you is, if you do the work, God can change everything. Let's pray.